Welcome to the Footprint Deep Dive Tools, Patterns, and Setups Part 1 video. My name's Trevor. I'll be walking you through Part 1, and then Anthony, he'll be walking you through Part 2. So there's 2 sessions to this one. There's a lot of material, and we want to be able to kind of split it up and show you some unique patterns and setups that we both look at. So let's just jump right into the agenda. Like I said, we want to pull everything together here in these 2 sessions. So we want to reinforce a lot of the concepts that you've already been taught. If you've watched all the previous deep dives, hopefully you have. I would say it's almost a requirement because you'll be able to get a lot more out of this one because these all build upon one another. And there's actually there may be a few concepts that you're not real familiar with that we do refer to, but they are in some of these sessions somewhere. So I'll try and reference them as I go so you know where to look in the event that I'm mentioning those. But I want to list out the core tools, as we call them, and then I want to list out some key patterns and setups, and this will all make sense here in just a few minutes. And then we'll show some examples. So that's really what you'll get out of Part 1. And Part 2 is very similar, except Anthony won't necessarily be going through all the definitions and such. He'll really be getting right into a bunch of examples. So footprint strategies. So strategies consists of tools and patterns and setups. So patterns and setups, and then a tool. And we want to identify a pattern or setup, and then we want to execute it with one of the tools. When we use tools, we're really talking about order flow tools, the footprint, or one of the unique Market Delta order flow tools. So this is kind of the quote, kind of the mindset you want to have in mind as we move through this. It'll help you understand how we're kind of putting it together. So we want to identify the pattern or setup, and then we want to qualify it with one of these tools. So while we're not trying to present a trading system, we do want to provide you with a systematic way of using the footprint chart to trade. And while what we're going through is not an exhaustive list, by far it's not an exhaustive list, it'll certainly give you a very good systematic way of approaching the footprint chart and using it to trade. So let's just jump right into what the tools are. So tools are the techniques used to qualify. I'll say that again, used to qualify a setup or pattern and then execute it with better precision. So tools basically help us qualify the opportunity and the opportunity is the setup or pattern. That's the way you want to think of it. The setup and pattern is more the context of the trade, and you'll see some examples of what we're referring to here. The tools, and I call them order flow tools. The tools are the imbalance trigger. Now, again, this is not an exhaustive list. These are the ones that we're just going to go through. So please keep that in mind. But the imbalance trigger, which I'll cover today in Part 1, the footprint filter will be in Part 2. Anthony will cover that. Thin spots, he'll cover that also in Part 2. And then 2 more that we will not be touching on today are the delta profile and the cumulative delta. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but if you want to learn more about the delta profile and cumulative delta, refer to the session that was entitled Everything Delta. We go into some details there. And probably after you watch this session a time or two, and then if you went back and watched that, you would probably be able to piece it together how that could be a tool that you would use. All right, so I'm going to stay on this graphic for a moment. Now, before I get into it, Don't think of this as a science where these lines, A plus B equals C, and that you have to use the imbalance trigger with the ones that it's drawn to. But we do want to give you an idea of some of the popular setups and patterns, and then which tool you would use to qualify that setup or pattern. So this is a very helpful graphic. Feel free to print it off or write them down. Basically, I want you to know this isn't a science, but it's a way to build your skill set using these tools and patterns. And the thing is, while we're listing out some setups and patterns, you no doubt will either have some already, or you'll come up with some as you begin to really dive in and use the footprint to trade. You'll have your own setups and patterns, and then you may use some of these tools or some other tools, qualifiers that you would end up coming up with. So again, don't think of this as exhaustive, but really do think of this as kind of the approach that we are recommending, especially if you're new to the software, and you can take it from there. One last thing, setups and patterns. They can be chart patterns too. So keep in mind, I'll actually show, let's see, is it on here? I don't see, like double tops and double bottoms. I'm going to show you an example of that today. That's a chart pattern. I don't have it listed on here because I just can't list this. There's hundreds of them. But I'll show you that and how we can use some of these order flow tools to qualify those trades. So let's jump right into patterns and setups. So like I said, there's a lot of different ones, and they all benefit using these order flow tools. Some are very specific patterns. Some are chart patterns, like the double top, double bottom that I just mentioned, which we will look at. While others are more broad, like a trending market. And what does that mean? You might be thinking, well, what do you mean there? Well, a trending market isn't so much a setup, but it's a market type. We got trending markets, we got range bound markets. Well, if you're able to identify that we're in a trending market, or we're in a consolidation period or range bound market, you can use the order flow tools to trade that. So we refer to a trending market or range bound market as a pattern or setup because it is a regime, trading regime, if you want to think of it, or a paradigm that you can apply order flow tools to once you understand what that pattern or setup is. So it's not like it's a real specific pattern like some of these, but it's a way to approach the markets, and then you know which tool, order flow tool, to kind of pull out of your quote trading belt and apply to that type of market. So there's a lot of different ways of applying here. That's what's great about the footprint. The footprint is a chart. It's a footprint chart. That's what it's called. It's not a system. So it can be widely adapted in a broad manner to your trading, to each style of trading. So the way you see Anthony trade, maybe in the trading room, that may not be your style. It's not everyone's style. However, what he's doing and the way he does it can be applied in other manners, and that's what you just gotta realize that. So anyway, let's move on to our first pattern and setup, which it's a reversal patterns. And so I'm going to show, I want to list out a couple patterns that lead to reversal and allow you to see what these reversals look like, but then how to qualify them with the order flow tools. So the two that we're going to look at are delta divergence. That's definitely a reversal pattern. And then we got the double bottom or top. We'll look at a double bottom example from, I think it was today or yesterday's market that I just grabbed a screenshot of. So those are the two we're going to look at, and I'll talk through them. So first, delta divergence. This is a pattern that looks for a divergence in price and delta, or the order flow for the bar. So when I use the word delta with respect to the delta divergence pattern, I'm referring to the delta for the bar. So let me turn on my laser pointer here, and you can see we're going to focus on this first signal right up here. This was a short signal, and so was this one over here. But let's focus on this one right here, this short signal. And what this was a new high for the day up here. You wouldn't know that, but it was. And the delta for the bar, the delta for the bar was negative, as you can see down here, right here. So that's where the divergence comes into play. You get a new price high with a negative delta. So what does that mean in layman's terms? It means that there's net selling at the highest prices, at new highs. Well, think about that. New highs should be drawn in buyers, right? When you think that, I mean, the idea is there's a correlation of price movement up with a positive delta and price movement down with a negative delta. But when we get a new high in price with a negative delta, that tells us that actually aggressive sellers are challenging that level and taking advantage of these high prices. And so it's a pretty reliable near-term reversal signal. And you could see what we got. We got the market. It pulled back about 4 or 5 points, and it was a nice little trade or rotation down. Now, when we talk about reversals, this could turn out to be the high of the day, and the market sells off 20 points or handles or whatever. Or it could just be a 2-point pullback, or it could be nothing. But it is bringing your attention to a divergence pattern, price and delta divergence, and it's an trade opportunity. Now, what makes this even better? Because the delta divergence just it's this pattern that'll show up. What makes it better is when we get this imbalance trigger, which is the tool right here. So this is the pattern or setup, the delta divergence, where it's brought to our attention. But then the order flow tool is the imbalance trigger. Now, I would have liked to have seen it up here on this one, but that's okay. It happened here, and this remained intact when the bar closed, opened up with some more selling, an imbalance trigger. That's what we like to see. A nice little rotation down before we got another, basically an imbalance trigger to the upside, a buy imbalance trigger. However, there's not really a pattern here that I'm relying on. This is simply just a trigger. And depending on the aggressiveness of the trader, could be where you get long. However, if you were short off this signal, that would be your spot to cover potentially, unless you have another target. So anyway, let's just move on to the next one. So it actually put in another high, as you can see, put in a high by 1 tick. We get another signal, and we got this is our trigger. Again, I would have liked to seen this up in here, but it happened here, closed on its lows, opened with another imbalance trigger sell, and that was as much of the chart as I could squeeze in the screen. So anyway, that is a delta divergence. The delta divergence, it is a custom study available from Market Delta. It's just happens to be a one-time paid add-on. So if you are interested in this, the delta divergence, reach out to us. We can provide the pack file that would give you this custom study. It's just a one-time paid add-on. So just reach out to us, call us, email us, or whatever, and we can help you out with that. All right, the next example is a double bottom Don't pay any attention to this one right now. I'll talk about that in a moment. What we're focused on is down here at the bottom. And what you have is, you could see where it traded down here, and then it came back and tested the level right here. So this is the double bottom that we're focused on. I just drew the yellow dotted line in to give you an idea of where the double bottom level is. And what we are, so let me just ask you a question. What is the pattern? What's the setup or pattern? Well, it's a double bottom, right? And or close enough, real close, within one tick. What is the order flow tool that we're looking at? It's the imbalance trigger. And you can see I got the yellow arrow pointing right to the 1484. And this is the imbalance, the buy imbalance trigger at support. This is exactly what we want to see. It's a beautiful setup. You'll see that quite often, and that is a great confirmation of a bottoming process. And you can see the move that occurred thereafter. This just I think this was just the other day. So, and this is the S&P E-mini. So anyway, you look for these double bottoms. That's your chart pattern. But then you need to qualify it, because you don't just take every trade. You want to qualify the trade. That's where the footprint really excels, is in the trade qualification. And so we use this imbalance trigger down there at that low to trigger our buy. Now, someone's probably thinking, well, where do I buy? You could buy at the open of this bar. That's the safest spot, because then everything in this bar is confirmed. It's a lot. Everything you see in here is confirmed. It's locked in history, and you would get long here. If you're more aggressive, you could trade as this thing moves away. You could get long. Remember, when this signals, this is a real-time trigger, and it could be green one moment and then go away, because of just it's based on an order flow imbalance down here, and it can change. It can change, and it will show you that in real time. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't want you to misuse how these triggers would work. It is your discretion. You can use it however, but I want to make sure you understand that. So the market rotated, right? And rotated up here about eight points or so. And I'm bringing your attention to this one because it's one thing to get in a trade, it's another thing to get out of a trade. And a lot of traders just have a set profit target where they'll let it go a point or two or three or whatever, and then they get out. And they leave a lot on the table many times. On trades that could have yielded a lot more. So this is an example of where, if you were long and you held it through this, at what point would you get out of the trade? Well, this would be, and I notice I don't got any support or resistance levels drawn in the chart, but this would be one I would look to, where I would potentially lighten up my position size, or potentially get out of the entire thing and then look for the next trade. And it's because, not because there's a pattern here. There's no pattern. It's just a trigger. It's the order flow tool, which is the sell imbalance popped on the chart, and that is enough to tell me to take something off the table. Now, looking back, someone might be saying, well, what about this one? Why is this one not worthy of getting out of the trade? I don't consider this a worthy exit because it's not at the high of a swing high bar. So it's actually on a pullback. It had already started to roll over on this bar, put in a new high, closed here, it opened here. I didn't get any imbalance on the bar that put in the swing high. So what do I mean by swing high? This is a swing low bar. This is a swing high. So it went up. This is your swing high, swing low bar, swing high bar. This would, I guess, be a swing low, although I'd like to see more than 2 bars. But then you get a nice rotation up, and here it is. So this is why. Hopefully that makes sense. Look, you might have your own ideas, and that's perfectly fine. That's what trading's all about. But I want you to understand my thought process in this, so you understand why I'm signaling that out as a potential exit or partial exit to lighten up on the position. All right, trending patterns. So we just looked at reversals, and now I want to look at a trending pattern and give you something to consider there. So these patterns, these are patterns which can lead to continuation of a trend. So the pattern or setup is a trend, and I want to use a tool to help you get in on a trend, which means a pullback. So market's trending, pulls back. I want to give you some ideas to how you can get in without buying the high of a move. That's what we'll look at. So a couple patterns we'll look at is the unfinished auction, the naked POCs, which POC stands for point of control, which, if you don't know what that is, which is fine, it is simply the high volume price within a bar. And naked means it hasn't been touched since it printed on a bar. So it'll draw a line across the chart, and it's considered naked until it gets covered up or touched by a future bar. And then I'm going to briefly show what we call easy zones, edge zones. These are real-time support and resistance. These work great, great for levels, pullback levels. Now I'm just going to touch on it. There are a couple other sessions specifically dedicated to the easy zones, so you want to definitely dig in to those sessions to have a full understanding of what they are. But I'm touching on them because they're such a good example of trending pattern and where you can helping you get in at nice levels. So first, let's look at an unfinished auction. And before I even look at it, let me explain what it is. So you see right here, you see this basically this price, this high print, you got 20 by 122. That is an unfinished auction. And it's an unfinished auction because if you notice on most bars, at the high of the bar, it's 0 by 238. And you'll notice at the lows of most bars, it's some number by 0. Okay? And so what an unfinished auction represents, it's just a term we've used, it represents that the market was offered here, they took out the offer, it went bid, and then it traded. What it shows is demand at that extreme price. And unfinished auction means we expect the market to come back to this price level, which would be right here, to come back to this price level and trade at it or through it. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to continue on indefinitely. It just means we expect the market to be retested. And a rule of thumb that I use for people, because this is an intraday pattern primarily, is I want to see it tested within a half hour. If it gets beyond that, then to me, the signal is diminished. I do expect it to be back and testing this level within a half hour. Okay, so keep that in mind. And this pattern is only a pattern that I consider, you only look at. Remember I talked about those swing highs and swing lows? Well, that's where you're going to look at it. Like this one right here, I don't consider this an unfinished auction because it's not the high. It is the high of the bar, but it's not the high of a rotation or a recent high in terms of trading activity. So keep that in mind. Hopefully that makes sense. So our whole idea here is we're looking for the market to trade this level again or continue higher, kind of like it had been up, pull back up, and now it's pulling back. But we do expect it to come back to this level 48.90 area. So what does that mean? It means we want to be a buyer. Where do we buy? So this is our pattern. And what tool do we want to pull out of our tool belt? Well, I'm going to pull out and look for the imbalance trigger. The buy imbalance is what I'm looking for. And that is what this arrow is pointing to. This is our buy imbalance. This is why this is so beautiful, because instead of buying up here at these highs, we let the market settle back and give us a signal based on our order flow tools to get in, and that's what we do. And it didn't make it easy. It rotated up, came back, put some heat on us. It didn't make it easy at all. And then we finally get another one, and this was the one that really kind of lit things up. One other point I want to make is right here. It just so happens this came in at a double buy imbalance here, or thin spot. Anthony will be covering this extensively in his part 2 session. I'm just pointing that out in case you come back to this video. I wanted to bring your attention. These are always nice levels. But the last comment on this is another benefit of the footprint, because most people just see the footprint as a bunch of numbers especially when they first look at it, and they totally miss or overlook the patterns. And the unfinished auction, this pattern right here, is a very good example of a nice pattern that you can use to trade off of that you'd never have using a bar chart or candlestick. You simply would have no clue that these are patterns that you could be executing off of. Same with even this, same with this. There's everything you see on this chart you'd miss on a candle or bar. And these are all great opportunities to really fine-tune and dial in your trading. All right, so let's look at the next one. This is naked POCs. Now, I do reference this as great in the trending markets. This chart doesn't look so much like like a market that is trending, but it does give you an example here of what these naked POCs are, and I want you to see how they can be utilized. So this line right here is extended back in history. It's extending out because it was the high volume print of a bar a while ago, and it extends forward in time until a future bar touches it, which is what we see right here. Notice it came right down to it and tagged it, the 175 contracts. That's beautiful. So that's our pattern or setup, is this naked POC. It's a pullback level. So what we do in a market that's trending up, we are watching for the market to, it's going to pull back to levels. And when it pulls back, these naked POCs can be an area that you would reference. And again, that is just your pattern. There's a lot of guys that just use that pattern and that's all, because that's all they have. But the footprint allows you to look inside the bar, and we pull out our order flow tool of these imbalances again, these buy imbalances in the case of a pullback, a market that's gradually trending up. We want to look for pullback, and we can see this thing pull back right to a big high volume level, right, kind of a back-to-back cluster by volume. This is nice. So it was a nice level. Now, what would have made this better is if I would have had a buy imbalance that signaled here. And technically this is a buy imbalance, but it's not color-coded because my settings, I don't recall what they were for this chart. They were high enough that it did not signal. However, we did get one here, right? See this one? This is kind of what I'm talking about, where it'll come back to that naked POC and then give us where the buyers step in and defend it, and give it a nice rotation up. So hopefully this makes sense. We're trying to give you just pure, very pure levels to trade off of, patterns and setups, but then tools. You could tell I don't got all kinds of squiggly lines and things drawn in the chart. We don't Not that you can't use that stuff, but certainly we're much more of a, I guess, a holistic trading concept where we're trading price, volume, and order flow and trying to extract important information based on that stuff on the chart. So another thing I'll just point out here is these delta bars we got down here. This is your, looks like I'm showing cumulative delta, and you can, that's, notice how it was sloping up and kind of confirming this move up. So that's another, certainly another tool, order flow tool, that could be used in conjunction with what I've just shown. All right, this one is, I've combined the naked POCs, which are the yellow or golden colored lines, with the easy zones. Now these easy zones I'm not going to describe too much because Anthony, there's actually 2 sessions he gets into those, but this is a really interesting way to pair up the two, which is why I wanted to show it, because once you get through his sessions, you might want to come back. You may recall this slide. This is very nice because you could simply look at the ones that have the easy zone, which is either the red sell zones or the blue buy zones, and look at the ones that have the yellow line through them. Those are the naked POCs, and use those just for qualifying. So this is an example. Remember, well, let me show you this. This is another one of those double tops, right? The market had traded up, pulled back, traded up. This is nice because we see the imbalance we get right here, the sell imbalance. This was that trigger. The market did rotate back down. Here was another buy. This is kind of that, like the trade I showed earlier. But I'm not going to talk too much about this. I just wanted to show you this combination because here we have some the naked POCs plus the easy zones combined, and this can well, you can dial this in so that maybe there's not so many of them on the chart, but this is a very nice combination of the two, and I'm sure there's going to be this easy zones we just rolled out just recently, so I wanted to bring this to your attention. You'll learn a lot more about those in Anthony's videos. But again, if the market's rotating up, we'd look at these zones as potential buy zones. And in fact, if they're coupled, like here's some sell zones, if they're coupled with the POC, maybe you put a little more weight on those. I would say yeah, because it's also a high volume print, and I like that. So I'm just dropping some ideas, and then looking to use the imbalance triggers at these things at these levels can be a great combination. So anyway, the goal of the deep dive series is to first teach you guys what the footprint is and then show you some ways of applying the information. So that's what my session and Anthony's session here is hopefully accomplishing. You may know other traders that have footprint patterns different than what we're showing, or chart patterns, and you can use what you've learned in these sessions along with those ideas and have your own, build your own edge. 99% of people are not looking at this stuff. They have no clue it exists, and so there's a big opportunity to develop a real edge, and it only takes a little edge in the markets to become a good edge. So anyway, I just want to encourage you in that, because ultimately that's what we're not trying to sit here and say we know all the setups, all the patterns, but we really do want to be able to kind of strap on a tool belt and a roadmap that you can, blueprint, I should say, a blueprint and a tool belt that you can step into it and start to make sense of it and grow in your ability to trade using order flow and the footprint. So next up, watch part 2 of setups and strategies to see more examples from Anthony. It's going to be a very enlightening session, I'm sure. So thanks, and make a great day.